Very pleasant good afternoon to all of our friends. We thank you for joining us on this afternoon's edition of Let's Talk. Let's Talk is a program sponsored by the South Leeward Conference of Seventh Adventists, where we discuss relevant issues impacting church members and the wider community. And today we have one of those issues that everybody wants to talk about. We are talking to the issue of abortion. Is it pro-choice, pro-life, or what? I do have a panel of capable individuals who will be sharing some perspectives with us. But before we go into that, we always begin with a word of prayer. So we invite you at this time to bow your heads with us as we have a word of prayer. Eternal Father and our God, we thank you for the opportunity to meet together again on another Let's Talk edition. We pray for your guidance as we discuss this very sensitive topic, the topic of abortion. We pray for your wisdom and your guidance in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, friends, whether you are joining us via Second Advent Radio, whether you're joining us on Facebook or on our YouTube channels, SLC Church Channel or SLC Adventist, we are just delighted to welcome you to Let's Talk this afternoon. I am Pastor Carson Greene, and I'll be facilitating this very meaningful discussion today. For many years, the issue of abortion has been a sort of hot potato topic across the world, but particularly in America. Terms such as pro-life and pro-choice are terms that I believe most of our listeners and viewers are familiar with. During the first week of May this year, 2022, news broke that the U.S. Supreme Court was about to vote on possibly overturning the Roe versus Wade. This was a 1973 decision that guaranteed federal constitutional protections of abortion rights. The news of that reignited the discussion on abortion, and in many respects, it has become a political issue. In this recent debate, some say that a woman has the right to determine if she wishes to end an unwanted pregnancy. That should be her choice. It's her body. Many others, and some of our viewers, may share a different opinion, but we are going to be discussing this topic this afternoon. Now, while many of our viewers live outside the US, it is commonly said that when the US coughs, the Caribbean catches a cold. So we know that irrespective of the political climate in North America, the discussion on abortion is one that is ripe everywhere. So how does the Christian relate to the debate? That's the issue. And where does the Seventh Adventist Church stand on abortion? Today on Let's Talk, we discuss this very current and important issue. And with me are a panel of very distinguished individuals. I shall briefly introduce them to you. We have a full panel this afternoon, so the introduction will be brief. I want to begin with Mrs. Deborah Henry. She is the Women's Ministries Director for the Caribbean Union. Sister Deborah Henry, good afternoon and welcome to Let's Talk.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Greene. Thank you for your invitation. I am just honored to be a part of this conversation this afternoon. You have given voice. You have given voice to a very sensitive topic that is not spoken aloud at all in our lives, not even in our homes. So I commend you for your courage and your insight.
Thank you so much, Sister Henry. I believe this is the first time we're having you on Let's Talk. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
In addition, we have attorney Natasha Baker. She was with us last week. She's back. We are happy to have you back, Attorney Baker. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Greene. I look forward to this evening's discussion.
I need to let you know that every time you come and Let's Talk, some people just call afterwards and say, she is so knowledgeable. She is so profound in her expressions. Thank you so much. We also have with us this afternoon, last week we had this wonderful lady who claims that she's not a theologian, but she demonstrated very good theological skills. We have Mrs. Beverly Chan. She is a social worker and CEO of Davis Memorial Hospital. Good afternoon, Sister Beverly. Welcome to Let's Talk.
Good afternoon and welcome again. It's my pleasure.
Wonderful. And finally, we have with us this afternoon an individual who I refuse to do the program without, because we do need to get the perspective, the medical perspective. So we have Dr. Avenel Henry, MD, OBGYN residency, Montefiore Hospital. Good afternoon, Dr. Henry. Welcome to Let's Talk. Or should I say,
Hi.
welcome back.
Good afternoon. It's good to be here.
Wonderful. We're going to begin this discussion by going directly to our gynecologist. I want you to explain to us just what is pregnancy. We're talking about abortion, but there can be no abortion without pregnancy. So let's begin by talking about pregnancy. What, doctor, is pregnancy?
I mean, so pregnancy, in the way that we all kind of think about it, we think about the process that brings about a child, Scientifically speaking, pregnancy is a big umbrella term, and you get that diagnosis anytime there's a sperm and an egg and your body starts to produce certain hormones that make either a blood test or a urine test positive. So if you think of, okay, just what does the word pregnancy mean? What is a pregnancy? It's anything that can make that blood test or that urine test positive. It could be in the right place. It could be like the right place in your body. It could be in the wrong place in your body, but all of that falls under the umbrella of pregnancy.
Now, I don't need to ask you this question kind of upfront, because a part of this discussion on abortion has to do with when does life begin? When an egg and a sperm come together and an individual gets pregnant, is that individual carrying a child, we talk about embryo, we talk about fetus and those kinds of things. But the debate is about life. From a biological perspective, when does life really begin?
Ooh, Dr. Greene. I think you invite me here just to get me in trouble, but it's okay. So the question, when does life begin, is more a philosophical question than a biological question. Actually, there's many, many different definitions for what life means. If you look at, okay, the processes of life and what it means for someone to be alive, you can think of, some people think of a heartbeat. Some people think of being able to survive independently. Those are just some of the terms and some of the ways we've been grappling with this definition as a society. When you brought up the point of, okay, when you have this egg and this sperm come together, is that woman pregnant? Yes, in some ways, because there's even situations that will never result in viable life, like it will never end up in there being a walking, talking individual. For example, a pregnancy that's not in the uterus, but it still involves an egg and a sperm, and by all blood tests, you are what they call pregnant. So when does life begin? It's a philosophical question, and I think we're going to talk about a little bit more what the Bible says. Biologically speaking, though, the terms and the processes of life, those happen well outside of the capability of that thing to survive on its own.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Let's continue this discussion. For those of us who are Christians, we understand that pregnancy is ideally supposed to take place between married persons. We know, however, that we do not live in an ideal world. I mean, the truth is, even in marriages, pregnancy does sometimes take place at undesirable times. Let's talk about this for a while. We will come to special cases and special circumstances such as rape and the like a little later. So we're going to take that out of the conversation for the time being. And we wanted to just get to the whole issue of, if you don't want to get pregnant, are there not responsible actions that can be taken to avoid it? I mean, abortion is supposed to be one of the methods of ending pregnancy. Now, of course, Dr. Henry, you can respond, but any of the other panelists on here, interestingly, we have all females, so you can likewise respond or add to what the gynecologist has to say on this. But are there not, especially in today's world, many different ways for people to avoid getting pregnant in the first place?
Yes, there are. There are a lot of ways that a woman and a man who don't desire parenthood can put things in place to not make that happen. There's a lot, and this is all under the group of birth control, if you've heard of people talk about birth control. So first of all, it starts with abstinence. If you are not sexually active, you won't have a child. So that's the most surefire way. But other than that, for people who are sexually active, and again, we're talking about, like you said, in the ideal context, which is, marriage and the family unit, there's a lot of ways. There's medications you can take. There's procedures you can do for a man and for a woman to reliably prevent pregnancy.
Now, I'm not sure if anybody else wants to add to that, but I want to run to our attorney, Attorney Baker. This afternoon in my introduction, I made a reference to Roe versus Wade and that issue of that landmark decision stretching back to 1973, which was recently reversed or overturned. Just give us a little bit. Some of our viewers may not be familiar with what that is. And so can you just talk to that a little bit for us?
Yes, Dr. Greene. So as you mentioned, Roe versus Wade is an American Supreme Court 1973 decision. It's important to understand that as in most places in American system, a case doesn't start with the Supreme Court. It starts with what's called a district court or a state court, and then it goes up the chain to an appeals court, and then the Supreme Court is sort of like the last resort. So essentially, hold on 1 second. Sorry, a plane was passing. So essentially, a lady, and she was named with the last name Roe, but that was not actually her real name, petitioned because she became pregnant and she wanted to be able to have an abortion, and under the state law it was illegal. And other ladies who had similar circumstances sort of had similar cases, and all of these cases kind of came together to become what the Supreme Court deemed as Roe versus Wade. And essentially, there's a lot of, discussion and opinions given by the Supreme Court in that case, but the ultimate decision sort of rests on the ability of a woman to have the liberty to choose what decision she makes for her body. And that the Supreme Court noted as a liberty interest and also a privacy interest. And the Roe versus Wade decision allowed, the Supreme Court said to the states that, it's not a hard and fast decision. You can still legislate at what point in the pregnancy, an abortion is considered legal. And the Roe versus Wade decision basically had it by trimester. And it, basically the first trimester, you're a lot more open to be able to have an abortion. Second trimester, we have a little bit more restriction. And then the third trimester, it really comes down to if it's an issue of the woman's health. And so that was a Roe versus Wade decision. Now there is an interim decision before we get to 2022 that was called Casey, Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And that continued the Roe versus Wade decision, but there was a caveat. So it kind of did away with the trimester aspect of things, and it went more to whether the fetus was viable. So a determination as to whether this child can live outside the womb would determine whether the abortion is legal. And I think that goes back to what Dr. Henry was mentioning, you know, the philosophical decision of what is life. And so the court kind of made a decision, well, you know, life sort of starts when this fetus, or I'm maybe not calling the right word for the right part of the trimester, but when this child, baby, can live independently of the mother. And that also brought about controversy because, you know, it could be different weeks. And I know Dr. Henry will probably have more on, you know, when a fetus is actually viable. But essentially, it's somewhere within the second trimester. I think it's like 24 to 20 something weeks. And the court determined that, okay, this is what the standard that we would go by. And so states were then able to legislate, you know, when it's the appropriate time for us to say, no, you cannot have an abortion at this point, or yes, you can. And then now we fast forward to 2022, where this whole discussion came to an head when, you know, a draft opinion from the Supreme Court was leaked by a news outlet. And, you know, I don't think prior to that, anyone ever thought that the Roe versus Wade decision or the Planned Parenthood decision would have been overturned, considering where America is going in terms of liberty interests. And so I think it caused quite an uproar. And you know, there's still an ongoing discussion as to whether it's right, whether it's wrong, where do we go on this? But the conversation has never really died. It existed throughout the years. So, for example, you know, I worked on Capitol Hill for a period when I was in undergrad. And if you pass the Supreme Court, which is near where the Capitol is, there would be persons standing outside with, what do you call it? Like posters saying
Placards.
wrong and stuff like that. So it's always been sort of an ongoing discussion, but subtly, and I don't think anyone really thought that we would go back to that Roe versus Wade decision.
Okay, interesting. Very, very, very interesting indeed. Now, I want to go a little further on before we get into the right and wrong of abortion. What exactly is abortion and its impact on those who do it and consequences maybe of things going wrong? First question, again to the gynecologist, what is an abortion and how is it effected?
So an abortion, and we're going to go with the definition that's relevant to this conversation, because there can be a spontaneous abortion, which is a whole other, grouping of medical occurrences. But for this purposes, I think we're going to go with abortion as a termination of a pregnancy. So there was a diagnosis of pregnancy, and for some reason or the other, we're talking about terminating that diagnosis. In terms of how it's affected, there's a lot of different ways. There's many different types of abortions, and they're based on kind of the reason and the clinical scenario of why you're terminating this pregnancy. So some things that people may have heard of, there's medications that people can take, pills, for example, and then the woman will have heavy bleeding, and then the body will essentially expel the contents of the uterus. There's procedures that you can do, surgical procedures under general anesthesia, local anesthesia, moderate to no anesthesia, that do the same thing, essentially just different devices, different procedures that we won't get into, but just again, to empty the contents of the uterus. If we're talking about a pregnancy that is growing or existing, or you have this diagnosis, but the pregnancy is not in the uterus, so it's somewhere else in the reproductive system. So that's the fallopian tubes, the ovaries, somewhere else in the abdomen. Then there's different surgeries that it kind of gets gray in terms of when people argue, and they also call those abortions. Medically, we don't give them the same name. But those also, there's different surgical procedures to remove pregnancies that aren't in the right place.
Okay, so if we keep it simple, we're talking about termination of pregnancy. Now, I know we don't have all the time in the world, but I want to talk to perhaps Sister Henry, Women's Ministries Director, or Sister Chan here, because you play a role as counselors. Do persons make the choice in your experience? I want to think people have spoken to you from time to time. Do persons who make the choice to get an abortion sometimes regret it? And how does this impact the emotional state of such a person? Sister Beverly, you want to go first on this one?
Sister Debbie?
Yeah, you go ahead, go ahead.
All right. I have been, as a number of people know, we're a victim of an unsafe abortion. It is something that I talk about to young people. But why do I share my story? I share my story because when I look at the Bible as this transparent book that speaks to the story of David and the woman at the well and the woman caught in adultery. That's why I love the woman with the alabaster oil at Jesus' feet pouring out, because he understood her pain. And that gave me the impetus to share my story. I can't share the whole story this afternoon, but I'll just deal with one aspect of the emotional fallout of abortion. And I have worked, I should let you know, in a sexual and reproductive health clinic for approximately 19 years. So I was wrapped up, tied up, and dangling in the whole phenomena, fighting for and against the whole notion of abortion for that length of period until I left. But my own experience was even before then. And the part of the conversation, the legal ratification, whether it's right or wrong or appropriate and how it's done, that has absolutely no spare in my thinking. I just don't get into that debate, because what's politically absent from the debate for me is that of what I say. Sorry.
We're hearing you, that's all right.
Okay, right. It's the part of the story that is not spoken about the emotional fallout, okay? I was at that time the AY leader. I was doing very well, very influential, very creative. When I'm having an AY program, the entire church will come back. What they did not know, in the middle of my performance as an AY leader, there was a dark part of me, critically dark. It was dark. It was dark. And I was leading while bleeding. The emotional fallout from the abortion, okay, and even within that sphere, I saw death more times than my hands can count. I know what it is. I'm not going to go into that part of it. But when I got my children, okay, after that, I was away from the church for a number of years. And during that time, I got 2 children. And it was my pastor brother, who some of you may know, right, who helped me not to go the next time. So when I went to my brother and I said, I know he's a pastor, I know all the preaching of the church, I'm church leader, and I told him that I'm pregnant. And he said 7 words to me: Beverly, people can only talk for 9 days. And those 7 days saved me from the next bout. And, but what happened was, I was emotional. I was afraid. I was afraid of my children. I was afraid of God taking away my children from me. I was nervous every time they go somewhere. I was just not feeling right. I cried. I always look back and said, well, I wish I had more children because I have two and they're grown. What about having more? What will God do? Will God forgive me? And that was extremely, extremely painful for me. I'm just giving
Sister Beverly, I want to interrupt you a little bit, because I want to make sure I'm following you
yes,
clearly. You're sharing an experience.
yes,
Do I understand you to say that at some point in your life, you had an actual abortion?
yes, I did.
Okay, and this was before you got your children or after you got your children?
Before I got my children.
And you're now saying, therefore, that when you eventually did get children, that abortion that you had created a sense of emotional stress for you and anxiety with respect to how it was going to, how your children were going to fare. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, and my fear that God will take them away from me.
Okay, so was that a sense of guilt?
It was a strong sense of guilt on an ongoing basis.
Okay, so you as an individual who have experienced abortion, you are suggesting that going through the process, there is more to just disposing of the unborn child.
Oh, yes.
There is the emotional element that you have to live with afterwards.
Very painful. And there were three texts in the Bible, three stories in the Bible that really helped me to remove beyond the guilt. And that was God, as David said, forgive the sins of my youth, one, and that was the main one, okay, that brought me to be able to not be proud of what I did, but come to terms to how I can use that to help others. And God promised to cast your sins into the sea of forgetfulness and remember them no more. And also, there's a code that I learned that between your past and your present, there is a dividing line. And God stands on that dividing line between your past and your future. And he holds your hand and he walks with you safely into your future. And that's why I'm here today. And this is the reason why I'll share my story with others, to let people know it is beyond the right or the wrongness of the abortion, but the emotional fallout that you can suffer for a very, very long, and the guilt that you need to come to terms with.
Let me express personal gratitude to you for your willingness to be so open. There are not very many persons who would be willing to stand up and say, I had an abortion. So I really do respect that, really do appreciate your willingness to share so openly, so candidly. And for those who are listening, I'm sure that there are individuals who are really touched by your testimony and the help that you can give as one who have been through it. You know, some of us talk to issues, but because we have not experienced it, we can't speak experientially. So we really appreciate that, having you on this panel this afternoon, willing to say that, hey, listen, I have been there. And I noticed also that you did say that, listen, you were in church. You were not just an individual out there who didn't know God and unfortunately got pregnant, but you were exposed to the truth. You were growing up in the church. You were an AY leader, a leader of young people, but you did get pregnant. And so I want to, before I move on to Sister Henry, let me ask you this question now. If an individual, a young lady, were to approach you now, today, 2022, and say, hey, listen, you know, I have aspirations, or I had aspirations of becoming this or that or whatever, you know, hey, listen, I'm pregnant and I really think my mother is going to kill me if she knows, or I'm going to lose my career, I'm not going to have opportunity to go on and complete my university degree and whatever. I think I want to end this pregnancy. What would be your counsel to such a person?
Pastor, I'm a champion. I fight for them. I've had a number of experiences where people come to me. One mother, church leader, she came to me, hi, and she was crying. My daughter's pregnant. And she thought to hear from me. Well, these young people said, listen to me, how can I help? How can I help? And right away, we put a plan in place for her, and instantly her tears were dry and the story moved on. There are a number of persons, okay, who I catch. There was a man, Christian, he wanted the abortion for his wife. Okay. And by the time I was finished with the conversation, I don't tell them to do or not to do, but I make a road and a pathway that they can make a decision for right. Today, the girl is 12 years old. He has crowned me to be the godmother of that daughter and brings me up to date with every movement she makes. And he thanked me for helping him to support his wife in not having abortion. So I am a champion of the cause, because if there is the support and the safety net to catch people before they do it, okay, they are going to respond. And that's where I champion this cause on an ongoing basis. Talk to me and the deal is over. It's not about what has happened. Yes, there's a time and a space to look at that, but how do we move forward safely? And that's my role right now. And I've been doing it on an ongoing basis.
Thank you so much. Sister Henry, I want to come to you. You are the Women's Ministries Director for the Caribbean Union. I imagine that unwanted pregnancy is a common thing that many women experience, and for various reasons. And of course, a woman can be married and not want to get pregnant and get pregnant. Abortion is sometimes presented as a woman's rights issue. Is abortion entirely a woman's concern? Sister Henry.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It's very easy. That is a debatable topic as well, because you see, it's very easy for you to view it in that light, because abortion is unique to a woman's body. So oftentimes people view it as the woman's sole responsibility. But I believe that simply the amount of personal as well as societal pressure that is brought to bear against someone who has an unwanted pregnancy, that pressure to me is an indication that it involves more than simply this woman's choice. So that is my first submission. Secondly, when you think of the fact that a woman now has a fearful responsibility for a life within her, that life that is now growing within her, that preborn child has a right to live. And that again makes it even more sensitive, and lets you know that certainly this is not up to the woman. In my opinion, this simply is not up to the woman. And coming in, if you are going to factor in the Christian perspective and the way God views life, then also that woman does not have that right to decide. You know, of course, let me backtrack a little. Let me just put in the fact that this is a fallen, broken world, and there are no perfect solutions, no perfect situations. So there will be instances where these things are these painful decisions have to be made, and it's often left to the woman. But by and large, given the fact that there is a father to consider, there's a family circle usually that is impacted, and in addition, the unborn child and the rise of that child to life, it changes the picture. It changes the picture.
Thank you so much, Sister Henry. Let me follow up with this question. What happens in a case where one person, and this time, say the lady wants the abortion and the man doesn't want the abortion? If she goes ahead and gets the abortion, how does this impact the man? And when I say the man, I'm talking about the father, So if my wife gets pregnant and she wants to do an abortion, and I don't want to have the abortion, because we're talking to the issue of whether it's just the woman's right or not. And so when the woman goes ahead and have the abortion, how does that impact the man, the father?
No. Definitely you would know that relationship will be impacted negatively, most times negatively impacted, because now the sense of trust is broken, and the sense of control in the relationship, it is very important to the man, is also damaged. That would not set up the relationship and the individuals for emotional health and relational health and wellness, right? Emotionally speaking, I cannot speak for a man, but from outside perspective, it impacts men as well. When there is an abortion for a child that they want, I have personal experience with friends who had that issue, and the man was never the same from up close. So I know it impacts them. It does.
I've had situations where I know that some men are so passionate about having a child that it means so much to them. And while we're not discussing here the issue of whether one is married or not, we're just talking about the issue of losing a child. The loss of the child can be very impacting to the man. But I want to get to Attorney Baker with this next question. Attorney Baker, I believe that we are all aware that irrespective of the legality of abortion or not, people still do carry out the practice, right? In a particular place, because maybe I should go back to, before I ask this question, to think about it. With the overturning of Roe versus Wade, does that mean, therefore, that states in North America are free to enact their own abortion laws?
So unless you're privy to something else I haven't read recently, because I'm not necessarily always up to date on the happenings, I don't think the decision has been overturned as yet. I think what was a draft decision of the Supreme Court was leaked, and it's anticipated that this is the direction the Supreme Court would take. And I thought the decision was expected to come out sometime in June, which I know is right around the corner. But I don't think that decision has yet come to fruition in an actual official decision. If I'm wrong about that, I apologize. But I think right now it's just a draft of what could possibly be the court's decision that was leaked. So if in fact that decision is, it does come to fruition, yes, the states would have to abide by whatever decision the Supreme Court of the United States make, and they would have to adjust their laws to comport with the decision. And so essentially, if the decision comes down that, the states have to, abortion is illegal, then essentially all the laws, whether they're doing it by trimester or by viability, would have to comport with the Supreme Court's decision. Now, it's important to note that the Supreme Court has several justices, and the draft may have just come from one justice, which could be the dissenting decision, or probably a concurring decision, we don't know. But I think I think with all the uproar that has been created from the leak of the draft, it's still uncertain what the ultimate decision would be. Again, if I'm wrong about whether or not a decision come out, I bow. But I thought that was still pending.
Okay, so I think my question really is, at the end of the day, because the real concern is not Roe versus Wade. For us as Christians, if you are living in a state or in a territory, a country, which says that abortion is illegal, the reality is many people still do carry out abortions illegally. So this is what I want to get at now. When I was a child, I used to hear, when you hear something and you don't want to necessarily give the quote, you say school children say. So we used to hear school children say that there was a certain bush that one could drink. They used to call it actually 666. 666 is supposed to be the mark of the beast, and that bush was so named because of what it did. And they said the saying was that when a woman is pregnant and she drinks that bush, she would get an abortion. What are the legal implications for both woman and her accomplice if things go wrong in an abortion where it's illegal?
I hope I'm understanding what you're saying. So you're saying that so we are talking about abortion in the sense of, because of Supreme Court decision, it would be somewhere where the fetus is more viable. And if things go wrong in that sense, there could be, and this is specific to the state, every state don't have the same laws regarding this, but if there was some injury to the actual person, if the state finds out that yes, in fact, this abortion was done illegally, there could be criminal sanctions or criminal punishment to that regard. And it could go both ways. It could be for the woman or it could be for the man if there's sufficient evidence that they played an important role or a significant role, I should say, in causing whatever injury. And that injury does not necessarily have to be to the unborn child that was, aborted, but it could be to the female herself. We see this a lot in situations, and I know we haven't gotten to that part of the discussion yet, but in rape, you would find that there are situations where an older man would rape a younger girl, and then if they don't get to what's called a plan B sort of phase in time, and the fetus actually, the sperm actually meets with the egg and something forms, then they would actually take them to a clinic or somewhere, maybe it's the bush person, to have this abortion. And so now you have a man who's involved in the process. And what's interesting too for minors, in some states, it's not required for their parents to even know that they went to have an abortion. So, there can be criminal sanctions in that regard, but of course it would be state specific or country specific. I hope I understood your question correctly.
Okay, I think you did. So let me go over to Dr. Henry now. When a person decides that they're going to have an abortion, a young lady, she's going to have an abortion. It's not legal, and in many Caribbean countries, it's not legal, but she wants to do an abortion. So most times it's done in a back room someplace, that kind of thing. How dangerous is it?
Extremely.
Yes.
Extremely.
Extremely dangerous. And I know this conversation, and I really enjoyed hearing from everybody that's contributed. And Sister Chan, thank you so much for sharing with us. But it's such a layered thing to happen to a woman and to us as a society, as we've all mentioned. It's a very, very layered, very, very layered conversation. But just the outright answer, the changes that a body goes through when a body becomes pregnant, physiologically, mentally, emotionally, physically, all the ways that you can imagine, those ramifications make everything that happens within that period more complex. So even if you think of, oh, just drink this thing or just do this procedure that maybe sounds, or maybe you've heard that a friend just did that, I have seen so many people already, and this is only the very, very beginning of my career. And I've already seen so many people have horrible, horrible things happen to them and horrible implications for their future due to unsafe pregnancies. The place that I'm doing my residency in right now is a community that, well, there's a mix of people of different like socioeconomic classes and so on. But because the hospital itself has a big department that has a lot of experience with these types of things, we get a lot of referrals from other places as well. And so us as residents training there's so many young women, older women, all the ages, all the classes, all the types, who have had some near-death experiences and then actual losing of their lives due to unsafe abortion practices. And this is in the climate where right now a lot of things are legal. I think we started to talk about Roe versus Wade, etc. And for people listening, you may think, okay, what does kind of all this have to do with anything? Deciding and discussing what we think about abortion as Christians and as people who believe the Bible and who follow Jesus Christ is sometimes hard to navigate through the world, because you may see like, okay, maybe I agree with this group of people a little bit, I agree with this group of people a little bit, and you find yourself lost and confused. I would say don't get too caught up in the weeds sometimes, because sometimes those weeds, like we just have to be apart. Sometimes you can't get, it doesn't make sense trying to fight that fight. But there's some things that are easy principles that we can latch on to. And in this specific case, like let's say abortions, laws have been passed that people cannot have safe abortion care. The immediate and evidence proven response is that people will just have unsafe abortions. Passing laws that prevent people from having abortions, it doesn't teach people how to value life. It doesn't teach people that, Christ loves them and is available to be the support that they don't think they have. It doesn't teach them any of that. What we have, because human nature is so horrible, is that when we limit things and take away what we think is an evil, sometimes because the women are also children of God who he loves and cares for and formed, in their mother's wombs. And a lot of those women die, like, just quite frankly speaking.
Sister, thank you again, Dr. Henry. Sister Chan, let me come back to you, because you have been through this. You have shared that you have been scarred, and that it was challenging for you. If you don't mind just sharing a bit more, just a bit more, because in today's world there is a lot that is being said about pro-choice versus pro-life, and sometimes people want folks to determine, are you pro-life or are you pro-choice? I personally don't like the terms and the implications of the terms, and we don't have time to go into all of the details today, but we're going to be back with part 2 sometime in the future. But from your perspective, as somebody who has been through this, you made a decision, you had to live with the consequences. And from what I heard from you is that you regretted what you were doing. Now, when you were in that situation and you made that decision, were you counseled? Were you encouraged to do this? Was it something that you just made up your mind, or was it a situation where friends encouraged you to go this route because of what it may appeared, how, I've heard some folks say, well, I did it because I didn't want the church to look bad, or I didn't because I didn't want to bring shame on my family, etc. What was your situation like?
I had no counsel. I spoke to no one. I just went and I did it. It was an unsafe abortion, very unsafe. And as I mentioned before, I saw death more than my hands can count. At the time, a number of people died from unsafe abortions. And the effect is, in one part I didn't share, that when my children were small, I gave them to my sister, okay? Just took everything. She took everything away from me because I did not feel that, I felt if I kept them, they would have been taken away from me. But if she had them, God would obviously spare their lives, okay? So to that extent. But when it comes to the counseling, no. But you see, secrecy is to illness as openness is to good health. I said secrecy is to illness. So the more you keep these pain and these trauma in your mind, it makes you sick. So you have to come to the place where, through the grace of God, you can share safely for the purpose of helping others. When it comes to the conversation of Roe versus Wade, let me be honest with you. I do not have the mental or the emotional space in my life to go into that debate. I have never participated in it, whether it's right or wrong, because for me, the emotional pain and facing death and everything was so pronounced in my life that I just don't talk about it. My role is just to help people. I don't know if I've gone to the other extreme, but if a young girl is pregnant in the church, I talk to that girl like nothing happened. I treat her. How can I help you? I pay no attention to that error, okay? So they can feel safe with me, to talk with me, to hug them, to laugh at me. Not that I'm saying it's right, but I just want them to feel still accepted as a person. I prefer them to do that. I prefer to do that than for them to go and have an unsafe abortion or an abortion period, because I know in my time, parents were taking, until now, parents take their children for abortion. And I know of a young woman who never got another child after the mother took her for that abortion. And so until the mother died, she never ever forgave her mother. She always remained angry because she never had another child. And so I've had, in working in the area of sexual and reproductive health and counseling people and working with them, there's virtually no space to debate the right or wrongness of this for me, okay? The emotional trauma and pain of having an abortion is too much to handle, and that must be an integral part of the conversation. As Avenel and the legal advisor said, it's emotional, mental, spiritual, physical pain. It's just pain, all right? And I just want to skip in on what Debbie said, and I agree with her. I'm not talking on behalf of men, we don't know how they feel, but I had to intervene in the life of a professor and his wife. He called me to witness what he was saying to his wife who wanted an abortion. And he said to her in my presence, I'll tell you this, if that child is mine, you do not have abortion. You will not have one. If it is not mine, you can go ahead and have the abortion. So he put her in a bind that if she had gone and have the abortion, she was saying to him, it is not his child. And so, no doubt, it was the pain that man was feeling if she would have done that that caused him to react in that way.
That's a very interesting scenario you use there. But yeah. There is something now. The four of you ladies on this platform, and there is a struggle that I have personally in 2022 actually. We have more than ever before, I believe, technology that can help in assisting people not to get pregnant in the first instance. I made a reference to this earlier on. It's amazing to me how many unwanted pregnancies we still have in this day and age when there is so much available today that was not available back then. What is it that we are not doing? Sister Henry, you're the Women's Ministries Director for the conference. I don't know. What is it that we are not doing? Are we not doing enough to prevent unwanted pregnancies? I know that there was a debate. Let me share this quickly. I was in a conference, an interdenominational conference once, and we sat at lunch at the table and we were talking about, what our church was doing. And a particular minister from another denomination said what they do is that on Saturday afternoons, they get in a pickup and they go to barber shops and those kinds of things, and they distribute condoms. Now, some of us were shocked at, is the church doing that? So we don't want to go into the debate as to, that kind of thing. We know what our stance is on abstinence, etc. But in spite of what we preach, people are still getting pregnant, in spite of the knowledge that is available. What more can be done? Sister Henry.
I want to also add that question, could it be that there is an increase in sexual violence and abuse, and many of these unwanted pregnancies, the women had no choice, and these practices thrive in secrecy. You made mention of the time period, and we are well aware of the fact that during this pandemic, there was an increase in domestic violence, abuse, sexual assault. So could it be a symptom of something deeper and darker?
That's an interesting proposition that you're putting there, and we didn't touch at all what happens in the case of a rape, what happens in the case of child abuse, etc. Are these justifiable reasons for abortion? Unfortunately, we're going to have to answer these questions in part 2, because I just looked up and realized that we only have 2 minutes more. But in the 2 minutes that we have, I don't know if I would conclude that, yes, there may be an increase in sexual violence. That perhaps is true. But I am not sure that I want to put all the abortions out there to sexual violence. I don't know. I don't know if somebody else wants to share.
No, there is an increase. But again, there is consent with the sexual prevalence within the church to some extent. And what the church can do, I know Nancy Van Pelt, those of you who may know her, you read her books. I've been to a number of seminars where she spoke to this issue. And one of the things she would do after outlining all the difficulties, all the challenges, even sexual reproductive STIs and so on, the last thing she would say at the end of her presentation is this: if you know for sure you can't be careful, you won't be able to protect yourself. And that's how she ended all her presentation. After giving all the ratifications and why you should abstain and everything, she finishes with that last line.
I was in one of those seminars when she said that, and yes, there was a certain gentleman who was so upset with that pronouncement. He said she had no right saying that in the church. That's an interesting thing. Our time is up. We will continue there next time. Yes. Next week on Let's Talk, we are going to continue our discussion on marital rape. We have some additional things to talk about next week. Marital rape. I know some of you may be saying, why don't we just continue the discussion on abortion next week? Well, some of our panelists who are key to the discussion on abortion would not be available next week, so that's the reason why. So next week we continue with marital rape, and then afterwards we will come back to this part 2 of abortion. Thank you all so much, ladies. It was a pleasure having you, talking with you. I know we have some deep waters to step into, when a person gets raped, etc. But this is all the time we have for today. God bless you until next week when we have part 2 of marital rape. This is Dr. Carson Greene saying, God bless you.